the Senate Homeland Security Committee voted to hold Dr. Anthony Fauci in contempt for his testimony last week, where he refused to answer questions. He cited the Fifth Amendment, the right to not incriminate himself, more than 100 times. The committee voted to hold him in contempt for that testimony or lack of testimony. Now it will be up to the Justice Department, presumably, to decide whether to prosecute. There are all kinds of legal issues. There are all kinds of Senate procedural issues. You just got a civics lesson a little bit on the idea of what can be tabled and not tabled. But the bottom line is this committee just voted to hold Dr. Fauci in contempt. We've got a number of people with us to answer some questions about what we just saw. We want to start with our senior legal analyst, Ellie Hogan. And I just want to start with the basic legal question at play here, which is Dr. Anthony Fauci was granted a pardon by President Biden for his activities up until, January 20th, 2025, right? So does that mean he can or can't take the Fifth when he's testifying? That's what's at play here.
First things first, any person can take the Fifth when they're questioned by Congress. You have that right. The complication here, of course, as John said, is that Dr. Fauci received a pardon from Joe Biden. If a person has been pardoned, he cannot be criminally charged for anything within the scope of that pardon, and therefore you cannot take the Fifth for anything within the scope of the pardon. But the third thing, and the wrinkle here, is Dr. Fauci's position through his lawyer is he might still have criminal exposure outside the scope of that pardon. That pardon only covers federal crimes. He could still be prosecuted for state crimes. We know there have been various state attorney general investigations of Dr. Fauci. He also could theoretically be charged for anything after the date of the pardon, after January 19th, 2025. And on that basis, I believe Dr. Fauci does have a valid legal right to take the Fifth.
All right, so this is a very pedantic question, but what is the difference between the power that Congress has legally, or in this case, a congressional committee, and a court of law?
Right. So right now, Dr. Fauci is in, I would say, contempt of Congress, sorta. He's more like in contempt of one committee of Congress. So first of all, ordinarily, the way this goes, and we've seen various contempt motions over the past several years. First, the committee votes. If it gets through the committee, then it goes to the full House or the full Senate. Apparently, Senator Rand Paul believes that he doesn't want to bring it to the full Senate. Why that may be, I'll leave to Manu and our congressional experts. But Dr. Fauci has not been indicted right now. He's not under any criminal charge for contempt. But what happens now is going to be the really important decision. It goes over to the Justice Department, specifically by law, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Jeanine Pirro, who's made a lot of news recently over the Reflecting Pool case. She, presumably along with the Attorney General, will make a decision. Do we bring a criminal contempt prosecution against Dr. Fauci? This has been done in different circumstances, but in recent memory. For example, Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon both were prosecuted, they were indicted, they were tried, they were convicted, and both went to prison for 4 months for contempt of Congress in relation to the January 6th investigation back in 2022-23. So this is real. I mean, the stakes here for Dr. Fauci could potentially be, depending what DOJ decides, a criminal indictment and prosecution.
And this is because Anthony Fauci the Republicans say, didn't answer their questions in this committee hearing. Beyond some, we can get into why they asked some of what would be seen as the less serious questions. They had reasons to do that. They say, what are the questions that he was asked that they wanted to get answered from him?
Well, specifically from Rand Paul, as he said at the beginning, it's this focus on the origins of COVID, whether NIH funded what he says is dangerous research in the lab in Wuhan, and whether Dr. Anthony Fauci covered that up, including in testimony to Congress. We have heard from Dr. Fauci on this before, including as recently as 2024 in front of another congressional committee, where he says the origins of COVID are more likely a natural spillover event, although we all must keep an open mind about that scientifically until we have better answers. The WHO has said it's seeking more information from China on it. He says that while the NIH, it is well documented, was funding some research out of Wuhan, that it wasn't against the restrictions around this kind of gain of function research. I think a lot of people would say that these are valid questions to talk about for preventing the next pandemic. What kind of research should the United States fund? What kind of research has the risk-benefit profile that will help us prevent the next pandemic while avoiding risky research that we don't want to have done? Those are the kinds of conversations conversations people want to have, but it's obviously difficult to have them in these kinds of contexts.
All right, Mick Terrell, Ellie Honig, thank you very much for helping us understand what we just saw.
Let's go live right now to CNN senior reporter Annie Grayer. She's up on Capitol Hill. Annie, what more are you learning about this historic vote today?
Well, Wolf, it unfolded in the committee room behind me where all Republicans voted to hold Anthony Fauci in contempt of Congress. And what's unusual here is normally what would then happen is an entire vote would happen in the Senate. Instead, the chairman of this committee, Rand Paul, is going to send this referral directly to the Department of Justice. And that is taking an unprecedented path that Democrats warned as this vote was happening could set a new precedent. Democrats warned that they might try something similar if they ever reclaim the majority. But Republicans feel firm in their position here that they want the Department of Justice to look at whether Anthony Fauci can plead the Fifth Amendment and not testify to Congress. Because as we saw in his hearing, Fauci pled the Fifth more than 100 times, which is his right as a citizen. But Republicans are arguing that they are demanding answers and the DOJ needs to investigate. Democrats were trying to delay this vote this morning and wanting legal experts to weigh in, wanting to have more of a discussion about this process before Republicans just went forward with it. At points, Wolf, this hearing got pretty heated. Take a listen to some of that back and forth.
I've let you go on, and we're gonna get to the votes.
Well, I understand that, but I don't remember ever cutting you off when you were ranking member, and I've always respected your rights, and I'll continue to respect your rights. I would just hope that you would offer that same courtesy to us because things do change and precedent is important, and I would urge my colleagues to table this resolution until we have a chance to look at the information, as has been the practice of this committee for as long as this committee has been in existence.
For the record, Anthony Fauci refused a voluntary private deposition, and that's why he was brought in under subpoena.
Because it was going to be one-sided.
Don't interrupt the chair. Don't interrupt the chair. With regard to access to records, there has been an unprecedented access to records. They have all been uploaded on a website that you were invited to join. You refused to join.
So that went back and forth for a while, Democrats arguing that Republicans have been pursuing a partisan investigation that they have not been part of. Republicans arguing that this is available for anyone to see. But now that this passes out of committee, it'll be up to the Department of Justice who are going to have all this. And Fauci, as we know, has a preemptive pardon from former President Joe Biden. That's another implication factor of all this as well, Wolf.
All right, Annie Grayer reporting for us. Thank you very much, Annie. Pamela.
All right, Wolf, with us now is CNN senior legal analyst Ellie Honig. So, Ellie, lay out the arguments here legally on both sides for and against contempt.
Well, Pam, Senator Rand Paul's core argument is, as Annie just said, Dr. Fauci was given a pardon by Joe Biden in January of 2025. A person who has been pardoned, of course, cannot be prosecuted for anything within the scope of that pardon, and therefore you can't take the Fifth. There's no way to incriminate yourself if you can't be charged. The response, however, that we heard from Dr. Fauci's lawyer and from some Democrats today is, okay, but Dr. Fauci still faces potential criminal exposure for things outside the scope of that pardon. For example, Dr. Fauci could at least theoretically face state-level prosecution. We know there are several state-level attorneys general who have open investigations into Dr. Fauci, and Dr. Fauci could theoretically be prosecuted for anything after the date of that pardon, so after January 19th of 2025. And so that's the basis that Dr. Fauci is maintaining he's taking the Fifth on.
As you know, Ellie, Dr. Fauci was given a full, unconditional and preemptive pardon by President Biden. But Rand Paul, the chairman of this committee, says that Fauci gave up his right to take the Fifth Amendment because of his opening statement. Does that carry any legal weight, what Rand Paul is now saying?
So there is a legal doctrine, Wolf, called waiver. And that means once a person has testified about a specific subject, he cannot then take the Fifth when he's questioned about that same subject. You can't say your piece and then when you're questioned say, oh, but I take the fifth now. And so Senator Paul's argument is when Dr. Fauci last week gave his opening statement, that essentially opened the door and he can't then take the fifth after he gave that opening statement. I think the response to that is if you look at Dr. Fauci's opening statement, it is brief, it's about 2 minutes long, and it does not actually get into the substance of any of the medical issues around COVID. Instead, what it really is Dr. Fauci giving an explanation of why he's taking the Fifth Amendment. And so if that's the prevailing view, then he did not waive his Fifth Amendment rights. But this is something that I'm sure will be litigated in the upcoming weeks.
And Ellie, you heard Republican Senator Josh Hawley talk about the fact that he even pleaded the fifth with questions about the color of his tie or the color of the carpets. Was that legitimate to invoke the fifth and questions about things like that? Because Senator Hawley argued that it wasn't because he's never going to be incriminating himself with answering a question like the color of his tie.
Right. You can't be prosecuted for the color of your tie or the color of the sky or whatever. What Josh Hawley was trying to do there, though, was sort of illustrate the absurdity of taking the fifth all across the board, no matter what a person's asked. But I will tell you, any half-decent defense lawyer who's representing someone in Dr. Fauci's position will tell him, if we're going to take the fifth here, we're taking it across the board, no matter what you're asked. Because once you get into the game as a witness who may have a Fifth Amendment right of saying, well, okay, that question falls within my Fifth Amendment right, that one doesn't, I'll answer this, I won't answer that, you're going to end up in a gray area as a witness in Dr. Fauci's position. You're going to end up putting yourself in potential jeopardy. And so I will tell you, any half-competent defense lawyer will tell a client in Fauci's position, you're going to take the fifth and you're going to do it across the board or you're going to answer questions, but there's no middle ground here.
So now we know Fauci could be referred to the DOJ with recommendations for criminal prosecution. What are prosecutors going to be considering? I mean, do you think that this is actually going to end up in charges filed?
It's a great question. It's the big question now. The Senate can hold anyone in contempt or a Senate committee for whatever they deem contempt to be. But when you're a prosecutor, it's a different and more difficult determination. When you're a prosecutor, you have to ask, can we prove that this person committed a crime of contempt beyond a reasonable doubt? And so if you're looking at this case, prosecutors, if they do charge Dr. Fauci, are going to have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he did not have a Fifth Amendment right there. And so if it's a murky legal question, if Dr. Fauci probably had a legal right to take the fifth, if Dr. Fauci maybe had a legal right to take the fifth, that's not going to be proof beyond a reasonable doubt that he committed a crime when he took